So I think we're live now. So a very good afternoon to all our attendees, and thank you for joining us today at another IMC streaming session, which is titled Real Estate and Investment Migration During COVID-19, which is brought to you in association with the Prime Property Group. My name is Denis. I am head of stakeholder relations at the IMC, and today I'm joined by Mr. Mohammed Asaria, who is vice chairman at Range Developments. By Mr. Frederico Seixas, who is a sales and marketing director at the Investaureum, Portugal, and Mr. George Dokuchaev, who is a commercial director at the Investaureum. So,
hello.
Basically, this is not the first IMC session, as I'm happy to admit. And obviously, if you happen to miss any of those, you are more than welcome to subscribe to IMC YouTube channel and follow the uploads we do on a weekly basis. So obviously, as we all know, the COVID-19 had brought a lot of confusion and uncertainty to the world, and investment migration is no exception. And obviously, travels are halted, events are being postponed, and everyone obviously is waiting what will happen in the near future. But there is obviously a positive aspect of it, and many companies have adapted to this policy and now apply a work remotely approach. And according to a most recent university study from Stanford University, this is actually beneficial, as people on average work about 1.4 hours a week more and statistically are more productive. Of course, the study doesn't cover all the economic sectors, but I'm pretty sure that it is applicable to our industry, investment migration industry, where a lot of work relies on day-to-day cross-border communications. Now, just to kick off our discussion, the starting point of our discussion, can I ask our speakers to introduce themselves and maybe provide a bit of a brief as to how their business was affected by the COVID-19 in their jurisdiction? So I'm happy to pass the lead to Mohammed to kick this off.
Thank you, Denis. Good afternoon, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Really pleased to be with you, broadcasting from my house in Dubai. A little bit of background: I started a company in 2012 called Range Developments. We're the leading developer of hotels and resorts in the Eastern Caribbean, all of which are eligible for citizenship by investment. So the Park Hyatt St. Kitts was our first project, which was completed in 2017. The Kempinski Dominica, which was completed in November of 2019. Both of these projects are fully subscribed to. And our most recent project in the island of Grenada, where construction started a couple of months back. COVID has been an interesting situation. I wouldn't go as far as using Denis's word of confusion, because through every challenge, I think we're able to, as industry practitioners, we're able to define the line and understand our businesses are going through a process of natural selection. And I think the industry participants which take control will be successful and have a stronger future. Indeed, our business developed out of the Arab Spring, which was a direct result of the last financial crisis. So financial crises typically provide opportunities on the side of the citizenship seeker, because people feel a lot more insecure, especially in some of the emerging markets. So in terms of the demand for citizenship, we're seeing it strong. We haven't seen a slowdown. What has changed is the type of buyer, where he's coming from, and what his motivations are, and we can touch upon that during the course of the panel. What I will say is, obviously, when you're running hotels, you have to take responsible actions early on. So we had to temporarily suspend operations in one of our properties. The other ones we had to run at skeleton staff. This is to protect our staff. This is to protect the safety of our guests, and also prevent the spread of this horrible virus in the relevant islands in which we operate. Caribbean leaders took steps very early. They shut down borders. A very difficult decision they had to make, given these islands are predominantly based on tourism. And for us, we were blessed in terms of, if you look at the timing, we had just finished one of our packages on the construction of the Six Senses, and we hadn't embarked on the next stage. So the timing worked out there, and we look forward to being back on site as soon as this pandemic is over. But otherwise, running a construction site through a real issue like this, can kill all sorts of issues, whether that's in terms of delay claims, whether that's all sorts of bank funding issues. Grace of God in the Caribbean, most projects are equity linked, given the structure of the CIP, so that's not a concern. But I've heard of projects where banks have refused to fulfill their commitments because of material adverse effect clauses. So I think the conservative businesses will survive, just like in any field. I hope that answers the question, Denis.
Absolutely, you did. How about Cyprus, George? Can you introduce yourself a bit, and how was the development of the situation in Cyprus?
Cyprus is doing good. My name is Dokuchaev. I'm the commercial director of Prime Property Group. Most of our business has to do with real estate development. We have been working successfully for more than 10 years, and obviously this is the worst crisis that we have ever seen. I think that it's even worse than the crisis of 2008. Okay, of course, it has affected everyone in Cyprus, and Cyprus has been locked down for a month now. But statistically, if you look at the statistics, right now it seems that the lockdown is going to be over within the next 1-2 weeks, so which is good news. The borders will not reopen in 2 weeks. Probably the borders are going to reopen in September. This is my personal opinion. Of course, the tourism industry has been affected and damaged a lot, and there are different estimations that the tourism industry is going to suffer a 60–70% decline this year, which is very bad news for the tourism industry. And tourism industry is the biggest industry in Cyprus. It's more than 20% of the GDP is generated by the tourism industry. This is not good news. Probably is going to create an increased level of unemployment. Some people say that the unemployment rate is going to reach 15 or even 20% by the end of this year. But I think that the economy is going to recover very quickly in 2021. Our industry, the development industry, has not been affected dramatically because the development business is a high margin business. So a lot of the local developers, definitely they have a lot of cash and they are cash rich, and our company is financially doing quite good. What we have learned from this crisis is that there are extra ways to optimize your business operation. First of all, you can optimize your office space quite dramatically. We have learned that you can reduce your office space by 30% without losing the level of performance. And apart from that, we have also done a lot of thinking about different creative ideas about different types of products, about improvements of quality, and we have done a lot of thinking because of this lockdown. Regarding the numbers, the demand has dropped quite dramatically. So this particular right now the drop has been 40%, and 50% has been the drop in terms of real estate transactions. The reason behind it, there are two reasons behind it. The first one is I would say the pessimism of an average customer, real estate investor and real estate buyer. And the second one is the technical reason, because now it's very hard it's impossible to come to Cyprus to do any kind of viewings, and it's very hard to, the authorities, they are working very slowly. It's quite difficult to certify power of attorneys, and so there are technical reasons which are big right now. For even if you want to buy a property in Cyprus, you can still do it remotely, but it is going to take a while. But we are doing well, and I think that when this crisis is over, our company is going to be successful as it was before the virus situation.
I think we should all aim for something more successful than we were before, for sure. Right. Thank you very much, George, for a quick update. Frederico, how can you please introduce yourself, introduce your company, and perhaps provide us with an update as to what's going on in Portugal?
Hello, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. First, thank you, IMC, for this invitation and this fantastic initiative. My name is Frederico Seixas. I'm based in Portugal, and I head the sales and marketing unit of Investaureum. Basically, Investaureum is a real estate development company that specializes in heritage prime properties in Portugal from north to south, so meaning Douro, Porto, Lisbon, Alentejo, and Algarve. Unlike other developers in Portugal, we're trying to always search for optimal real estate outside the big and obvious cities like Lisbon and Oporto, where we always look for buildings like old monastery churches, factories, buildings that have an interest and a vested interest in the regions. In this way, we're also contributing to develop the region, creating jobs, creating new touristic attractions, and this has been extremely successful. We've been doing this for quite a while, and with a lot of success. We always aim to create a product which will be eligible for the Portuguese Golden Visa. The Portuguese Golden Visa, there's several ways to attain it, but in terms of real estate, the most expensive investment is via the 280,000 euro investment, where you have to go into real estate property investment, older property than 30 years, and we've been doing that with a great team of architects, engineers, real estate people, of course, people like myself that come from the industry of investment and migration, and we are very happy with it. Of course, Portugal, being a little bit a peripheral country of Europe, had the time to prepare itself for this crisis, unlike Italy or even Spain. I would say that we were behind Italy 3 weeks and behind Spain a week, which gave us enough time to really prepare our lockdown, learn with the mistakes other countries had made. And Portugal always had this position going back to Inquisition. When the church arrived in Portugal, we were already prepared, and all the Jews had changed their names, and we started to eat different foods, etc. Napoleonic invasions, the same thing. So we were always able to learn with our neighbors and try to adjust. Of course, this is an unprecedented situation. None of us have ever lived something like this. Of course, it has affected all economical industry worldwide. In our specialized industry of migration, I think that all of us have been suffering with a halt because embassies are closed, powers of attorney are not possible. I mean, biometrics are impossible to do at this point. Although we have all the online subscriptions, the legal entrance to Portugal is not allowed at this point. So we're all suffering. Of course, like George said, we're real estate developers. We are cash rich. We have a lot of air in our lungs to go. What we're learning from this crisis is really to create and to become more efficient, to learn how to work more remotely. And of course, all the other organisms like banks, state, immigration services, etc., are also applying themselves because they need the business in order to get all of these steps and processes more and more remote. So at the end of the day, I think that we're going to come out of this crisis a lot more efficient. We are all people of the world who travel a lot. We are used to working remotely, but many of the local agencies, the banks, etc., lawyers, notarized, I mean, they were not used to this situation. So they're all learning. So at the end of the day, I think we're all going to be a lot stronger from these crises. And I think that we're going to learn a lot.
Absolutely. I mean, it's definitely good to hear from this perspective. So while we're trying to quickly fix a few technical issues, I have a question. Since you, Frederico, mentioned that, obviously Portugal was for years, it was one of the most, actually the most popular program, the residency program in the EU. And it was obviously, as you have mentioned, it was also affected. How well the country was prepared for this? And in overall terms, what are the measures taken by the authorities in the context of investment migration? I mean,
well, like I mentioned before, I mean, nobody was prepared for this situation. I think we adjusted extremely well. Our government was very quick with the lockdown. Schools were closed, companies were closed, etc. Only supermarkets were working, pharmacies were working. All the kids in Portugal right now are doing school via remotely. Even a national channel in Portugal is transmitting right now school for all the kids. So we're doing extremely well. Of course, on the medical side, we also had a very interesting plan which allowed us to basically not to lower down the curve of infection. We had a system that via phone, they were all attended until they were in a very serious or grave cases, and they went out of their houses to a hospital or to a medical center close by. And this saved us a lot of lives, and I think that Portugal is cited as an example of good practice. And of course, the Portuguese people, although we're Latins, we really behaved extremely well this time, and we all abided by the shutdown. We all stayed home. I'm right now calling you from my farm. I have a farm in the middle of Portugal where I've been with my kids. I have 3 boys, and they've all been studying from here. And most of the Portuguese families are doing exactly the same, and nobody's going out. So in terms of investment migration, I think that, of course, we have today many investors on a hold situation, but the majority of their hold situation has to do with the fact that we cannot move forward. But we've continued to do deeds. We've been able to do some deeds in the last couple of months. But we are really working with local authorities, lawyers, banks, etc., in order to improve more and more the capability of remotely moving forward with the process of residence by investment in the Portuguese program.
Okay. Has there been any shifts or changes in the investors' minds or perceptions about the Portugal golden visa, or how things are developing when it comes to relationship with investors? What has changed?
I think you can look at it in 2 ways. One way is basically the investors right now are all trying to understand what is happening in the world, and they kind of become more in a hold situation or in a hold situation. On the other hand, more and more people say, wow, Portugal, what a good example. Again, more and more I want to live in this country because they've dealt so well with this disease. Apart from, if I had any doubts of moving to Portugal, this was again a reassurance that it really abides extremely well with global disasters. And one of the things that will also characterize Portugal is that the medical centers and hospitals are treating not only the Portuguese nationals, but also every foreigner in Portugal is receiving exactly the same treatment, whether he has a residency or not.
Okay, wow. I mean, if you see it from this perspective, in the long run, I think we can all see a change into demand overall of the investment migration industry in light of how country had tackled the pandemic. So probably there's going to be a good point here from this perspective to see. What about you, Jens? Can you perhaps advise us as to what has changed in your clients or your partners' mind when it comes to your jurisdictions? Maybe we can try ask Mohammed first to start with this, because something is wrong with his screen. Maybe it will be changed when he starts to speak.
Hi, Denis. Can you hear me? Am I coming across loud and clear?
Well. Unfortunately, we don't see you.
Okay, I'm sorry, but I'll try and make it up. I'll make it up with my voice. So look, we've seen quite a fundamental change in terms of the investor's mindset in citizenship by investment. And I think it has to be remembered, and we have to examine where are the investors coming from. Typically in citizenship by migration, investors are coming from an emerging market. And investors in emerging markets are going to be suffering more than those individuals in the developed markets. Developed markets have a number of tools to hand They arguably have better public healthcare systems. They have better tools in which they can combat and put fiscal stimulus into their economies. And they have larger reserves which can help feed the population. Whereas if you look at the emerging markets, unfortunately, they lack the stimulus which can start repairing the countries. They may have shortages of basic necessities, which could potentially lead to civil unrest and crime. We're seeing that. I mean, last week there was a letter from the president of South Africa who wrote in the national newspaper begging his citizens not to turn to crime. But I mean, if you look at it, the individuals are on the street, not because they wish to be, but because they have no food. And some of the other economic challenges which are going to be seen is higher taxation, higher inflation, the implementation of capital controls, depreciation of currency, debt to GDP levels rise, you have electricity power outs. So, I mean, we're all blessed. I'm sitting in Dubai, my colleagues are in Europe, you're in Russia. Yes, we may be facing some small difficulties with lockdown, but it's nothing compared to some of the day-to-day challenges that individuals in emerging markets, whether you're wealthy or not, are going to be facing. I mean, I was speaking to an investor a couple of days ago, and he's seeing police on his streets, outside his residence for a significant period of each day.
Wow.
And, that creates stress on the family. So, going to an investor now saying, dear investor, here is a citizenship by investment product which helps you travel the world without a visa, that sales pitch isn't there anymore. Yes, travel was a beautiful, distant, happy dream from a couple of months ago, but now when an investor is looking at citizenship by investment, he is also looking for economic migration of his business and personal migration of his family. And I think, you hit the nail on the head with the last question. It'll be how countries have behaved through this pandemic. And, we're actively promoting Grenada, where our current project is. And Grenada, through serendipity, for want of a better word, was awarded the E2 visa in 1983, which today allows citizens of Grenada to invest an additional small amount, $150,000, and actually economically migrate to the United States, anywhere in the US they wish, so they can move their business. And I mean, if you look at the mindset of certain investors, they're sitting whether in India or Pakistan or parts of Southeast Asia, and they're there saying, my business has come to a sudden economic halt. When I'm going to restart, do I want to restart with all the challenges which are around me? Or do I want to economically migrate my business and personally migrate my business to the United States? And that is the discussion we're having on a regular basis, daily with investors, and hence why we're seeing additional popularity with the island of Grenada. And I see that, and I see those discussions happening more frequently. Because you have some other issues. You're in Russia from what I think you told us at the start. In Russia, people are nervous. It's not just Russia, but actually a lot of states have increased their powers on their individuals. Everyone now has apps which tells the government where they are, which tells them, can we walk a dog, and you have to ask for permission. A lot of countries are nervous that these civil liberty, I don't want to use the word restrictions, but prudent measures in a time like this will be used after the end of COVID to impede on civil liberties, because once someone has the power, they don't usually give them up. And a lot of individuals, high net worth individuals, are anxious about this and feel that a second citizenship will assist them in what I call a 1984 George Orwell situation. And maybe in a week's time, 2 weeks' time, the world goes back to normal. We all pray for this miraculous cure or this miraculous vaccine. However, what has the last 2 months or 3 months shown us? That a high net worth individual needs to have a plan B, and it needs to allocate a portion of his wealth to the citizenship by investment asset class, which will help him navigate in times of stress. This pandemic has shown the high net worth investor that he doesn't have time to obtain another degree in hindsight and push this decision off for the future. For the stability of his family, citizenship by investment really needs to be a decision he needs to embark on now, and that should be what he's coming out of this crisis learning. And as I said before, it is no longer just how many countries can I go to in the world, let me choose the best one from this list I have, because that doesn't exist now. It's how many countries am I banned from going, unfortunately. Okay,
Yeah,
yes,
totally
I agree, travel
that.
will come back, and that'll be travel will come back, and that'll be a great thing for the future. But you need more than just visa-free travel. Economic migration for your business and personal migration for your family. And that's why I think Grenada with the US, Cyprus with my co-panelists, and Portugal with my co-panelists are going to become some of the leading jurisdictions in this business.
Absolutely. Actually, good you pointed out in Cyprus, because I'm pretty much sure that Cyprus is very popular as a CDI program. George, something had changed in your clients' minds or perceptions? Because as we can see in case of Mohammed and Frederico, people start to see their options in their Grenada in Portugal and Caribbean in general in Portugal as a different product. What's happening with your investors and your clients about Cyprus?
I think that we all are going to have more clients who wealthy people who are going to be willing to immigrate and relocate to a different place. Because if you have been watching the Russian TV channels and YouTube channels and the Forbes magazine, which has been filming a lot of very nice content, interviewing top Russian business people who have lost their businesses, you will see that a lot of people are going to be ready to immigrate and relocate to European. I think that the first choice is going to be, if you can afford it, you will want to immigrate to the European Union, and up to 20% of the Russian businesses are going to go bankrupt. This is the bad news, and the government has not been providing any kind of support to small and medium-sized business people, which is bad news for Russia as a country, and which is good news for companies like for developers and companies who have to do with immigration and real estate investment. So we will see what is going to happen, but I think that we are going to have an increase in the number of wealthy people who are going to be willing to relocate. First of all, because they might lose their businesses. The second reason is a big reason, because these small and medium-sized businesses are the ones who are responsible to provide lifestyle services to the wealthy people in Russia. So these people are not going to be around. Okay, these companies are going to close, which means that the lifestyle is going to suffer if you want to stay in Moscow and you want to keep living the same lifestyle as you used to. Okay, and number three, of course, is the crime rate. I think that the crime rate is going to grow, obviously. I think it has grown in countries like Russia and Ukraine, which is bad news. And I think that this problem is going to escalate to a higher level, unfortunately, and it's going to take 1 or 2 months for the situation to worsen. And I think that the situation is going to be even worse. So I'm sure that all of us are going to have more interested people in a couple of months. We have seen a little increase in prospective passport clients. Again, the only obstacle, which is real, is that these people cannot travel to for an inspection trip. And also number two is that biometrics data can be only collected in Cyprus, which is the only reason, apart from an inspection trip, the only reason to visit Cyprus to do your investment. Apart from that, the Cyprus government is doing fine, and the way the law works here is that to buy property, you don't need to come to Cyprus, so you can buy online. I mean, this is not an empty statement. This is a real fact. So if you want to buy something, and if you are happy to buy without coming to Cyprus, you can do that. You send an email to authorize a person to deposit your sales contract on your behalf in the land registry. That's it. You don't have to have anything else. This is amazing, and people don't know about that this is what we need to be promoting more. But if you want to file an application to become a resident or a citizen, you need to come, because your biometrical data can only be collected in Cyprus. This is the only problem which needs to be resolved by the local government, and this is what we need to be discussing, and this is the message that we need to be passing to the government. Apart from the minimization of the application periods and things like that, I think the only thing is that can be realistically done and can increase the number of incoming investment is the biometrics. This is the only reason one needs to come to Cyprus to apply for a residency card or a citizenship. But the Cyprus residency program is not the biggest program, because Cyprus is not a member state of the Schengen zone. So logically after that, because the Cyprus residency program is competitive, in fact, and if Cyprus was a member state of the Schengen zone, the Cyprus residency program would have been as big as the Portuguese residency program.
Ambitions are always good, aren't they?
Touching a little bit on George said, I think that apart from this COVID crisis, we need to understand more and more how countries are reacting in terms of economical crisis. And once again, I think that the European Union, and namely Portugal, has doing a fantastic job, because basically in Portugal during this crisis, you have, for example, if you can't pay your mortgage or if you can't pay your rent, banks can't foreclosure or landlords can't foreclosure. So the laws have been done in a way that the government will give all the support to companies and individuals during this pandemic crisis. And then again, like Mohammed was mentioning, I mean, if you're in a third world country or in Southeast Asia or wherever, and you're going through economical difficulties, I mean, there is absolutely no support. And more, going back to our industry, the investors look at this and understand and see what's going on in terms of economical crisis. And maybe if the companies were based in Portugal instead of other countries, they would survive, because they would be helped by the government. And this is very important not only to small but bigger companies, airline companies, for example. What's going to happen in the future? So I think that the importance of the jurisdiction where your family is protected, where your kids can still attend to school, where you can still maintain your business, where your employees will be subsidized and helped by the government, is also a very important factor. Grenada is a fantastic jurisdiction. It has a fantastic medical school. I don't know what's going on in Grenada right now. I've not been following up. It's a wonderful destination. It's an E2 country with all the benefits, but it's in the Caribbean. Again, I mean, Europe is Europe, and I think that the measures that the European Union has been establishing for all members is fantastic, and this will make a huge difference in the very near future for the recovery of economies.
Well, anyway, I mean, I think we actually just a further a comment on this part would be that unfortunately or fortunately, depends how actually you see it, the worse the situation is in the world or in a particular country, the better it is for the investment migration industry, because cases like the pandemic of the coronavirus, unfortunately, they provoke people to consider a second option. Actually, speaking of the post-pandemic world, there was a very interesting article on iMyDaily, which was written by Mohammed Asaria. And I would encourage everyone who is in attendance to have a look at this article, because it's actually very interesting. Basically, it was about the post-pandemic landscape of the investment migration industry. Mohammed, perhaps you can maybe elaborate a bit more on this concept of how you can see the post-pandemic world, but in the case of investment migration and possibly in the case of the real estate particularly. What would be your thoughts on this part?
No, Denis, thank you. Thank you for your kind words about my writing. And look, let's really dwell on some of the points I raised there. As there has been a massive destruction of wealth over the last 2 to 3 months, capital has become constrained and even more precious. So I think the programs which are going to be really benefiting are those which have the most cost benefit. Grenada today, the price point is 300,000 for your family, out of which 2/3 is invested in real estate, 1/3 is the government fees. And the industry or the investment migration investor now is going to be reserved to the real high net worth individuals. It's not going to be the person with his last $100,000 scraping it together so he can travel the world. It's really the high net worth individual and he's going to be doing a total cost benefit analysis as to where is the best jurisdiction for his family. And, as my colleagues mentioned, it's about the fiscal support. And we recognize that Grenada is a small island in the Caribbean. It's safe and it provides investors with an island which is politically neutral. But really, a reason why it's become so popular is the E2. And notwithstanding the president's comments and his clarification, which he gave last night, it's clear that this temporary ban doesn't apply to the E2 because it's a non-immigrant visa. But if an investor were to go and move his business and economically migrate to the United States is the country which has really given the biggest stimulus to its people. I mean, it's $10 trillion, if I'm not mistaken. There's another 500 billion being signed this afternoon. I mean, the Fed is really keeping the whole countries, if not arguably half the world economy, alive today. It's the world's largest market. And that's why countries, Portugal, Cyprus, Grenada, which have access to the European Union, the United States, in the case of Grenada, have become really popular. And I think one thing which we're seeing is an investor is coming to us and they're saying, we need a citizenship quicker than anything else because our home country, it's going to hit us with tax. We feel prejudiced if we're not from the indigenous population. I'm sure you've seen some of the pictures coming out from some of the emerging markets. So the investors we're talking to, it's not just about residency. They now really need a second document, a second citizenship, which could actually become their primary citizenship, given what's happening in their emerging markets with some of the prejudice, be those sectarian, economic, or otherwise, which they are facing. And, Grenada, other Caribbean nations, and as the countries that my colleagues are from, Grenada has adopted a totally online system. We're selling shares in a hotel. You don't even have to come to Grenada. You can transact from your home state. They do desktop due diligence on you in a very thorough manner. So, the whole system is set up to facilitate that emerging market investor without compromising due diligence, provide them a citizenship within 3 to 4 months. So it provides them the flexibility, the ability to move, the ability to access the world's largest economy, and provide them the option B, and potentially insulate them from what I believe is going to become citizenship-based taxation on a number of individuals around the world. That's just some thoughts I have. Happy to discuss it further.
That's actually superior. I mean, thank you very much for this. And a lot of this has been written in an article, and I would really encourage everyone to attend and to view this article. Before I go further, I'd like to remind our audience that you can always ask a question via the GoTo platform on your right, or via IMC Twitter, and the account is @IMCouncil. But we already have received a few questions, in fact, just so our speakers know about that, and we'll attend them a bit later. In the meantime, to make our discussion a bit more interesting and say with data, I would like all the attendees to answer a quick poll as to how important the real estate, the CBI real estate, is for you and for your business. So you should probably see now the poll, and we would all ask you to please express your thoughts. And in the meantime, there are several other questions that we have coming up, particularly about the real estate. As kind of a closing question, gents, can you please all, by the time we receive some answers, can you please all express your thoughts or provide some suggestions to our audience, because we would all agree that the real estate is financially it's the biggest contributor to the wealth and to the total amount of investments made via the investment migration industry. And from the social impact perspective, it is also basically the biggest contributor with the amounts of jobs created and other aspects. So perhaps you can suggest something as to how this can remain a viable investment option in light of the pandemic. Maybe there are some steps you think people can take, or there are any other suggestions you can provide to the audience. So we have, in the meantime, we have received a poll. More than 60% had answered so far. I think that's pretty much enough. So the results are as you can see them on the screen. And most of the audience of ours, they think that real estate component within the CBI and the residency by investment is very important. 13% think that it's moderate. I'll probably say it's those who have different investment options. And just a portion, meaning 7%, they say that the real estate is not important at all. So, as I was saying to you before, gents, what can you suggest to our fellow audience, the steps that can be taken that real estate can still remain viable? Because we don't know how pandemic will affect this part of the industry, but if we as an industry collectively prepare ourselves, we'll probably be in a better position in the long run than not preparing ourselves. So what do you suggest, please? Shall we start with George, maybe? What do you think, George?
Okay, yes, I can. I can give a couple of advice, a couple of pieces of advice in general. I think that if we have any like prospective investors in the audience, I would advise not to, to stop being passive. You have to be, because there is no marketplace. I mean, real estate is not a stock which can be easily sold, and bought on a marketplace. So with real estate, you have to be working. You have to do your homework, and also you have to be very, very, I would say, smart with the timing. So now is the right time to negotiate the best deal. I mean, now you can find your property on the internet, or you can talk to your advisor or consultant or your immigration consultant, real estate agent, and you can find the best piece of property, because now is the right time for people with cash to take decisions, right? So if you wait for a couple of months more, probably you would not be able to enjoy the same opportunity, because the Cyprus real estate market is a very tiny market, so the time is very important. Now is the right time to approach developers and agents to get the best deals. This is the only piece of advice, which is a big piece of advice that I could give. My big piece of advice to the authorities would be, first of all, to allow passport investors, to come to Cyprus. Probably, you need to ask them to bring a health certificate with them to make sure that they are not carrying the coronavirus with them. And then secondly, you have to enable remote biometric data collection. So these are two big pieces of advice that I could, that I would give to the authorities. But I think that they are going to work it out. The parliament and the ministers here have been discussing, the new regulations and new rules which will allow, an easier application for passport investment in this year. So I think that it's going to be announced very soon. Okay, with regards to clients, I would advise not to, to stop sleeping, to wake up and, to do your homework and, to invest, because now is the right time to invest. If you come back 2 months later, the prices are not going to be as attractive as they are right now.
Okay. Mohammed, do you have any suggestions that our practitioners can undertake?
Yeah, I think you mentioned we have some people here who may be not day-to-day practitioners. So I think it's important to really provide the undertone to your question, which is there's two routes in the Caribbean to obtain citizenship. One is through a government contribution and one is through a real estate investment. And the differential between donating money or giving money away under the statute to the government and actually obtaining an asset is very marginal in the Caribbean. On a family of 4 basis, it's an additional $70,000. So given the tectonic shift from investors from, historically, which have been middle income investors, to now the ultra high net worth individuals, that $70,000 isn't so relevant in terms of the decision matrix, because people at that bracket are loath to give away money. So, the practitioner which is sitting there advertising, we're doing it at the cheapest possible price, it's not going to make a difference, because now the investor, the high net worth individual, is looking for a branded product. They're looking for a quality developer. They're looking for people who can offer service and provide them that security. So, it's no longer now that the cheapest is going to be the best. The whole package has to be there. And, I would stress to all of you who are involved in this industry, look at the high end, because that's where the returns are going to be. I don't want to blow our own trumpet, but we're the only people who've actually delivered in this space. And our prices have held firm. We're not here offering any discounts. We're not here offering any rebates or anything like that. Because Grenada at $250,000 or $300,000 for a family, it's very attractively priced. And we provide that security for investors that we've done this before, and within 3 months you can have the ability to change your life with a new citizenship. I trust that answers your question, Denis.
Yeah, it totally does. What about you, Frederico? Do you have any suggestions that you can provide?
Well, basically, I think, yes, I do. Thank you, Denis. But I think that basically, both for clients and for the authorities, this pandemic crisis is telling us that more and more authorities need to be worried in having a very safe public health system that works well, a very good education public system that works well, stability and economic stability too of these countries. Because today, if you look at the real estate investment, like my colleagues were mentioning, more and more, you need to be sure, where am I taking my family to? I mean, what about the next crisis of whatever, cow fever or any other disease that may arrive? Will I have doctors, public health, good public health? Will I have economical stability, education? So it's not about only the fancy places with the beautiful beaches. It's more than that. And I think that this crisis has been showing us this more and more. Like, for example, Portuguese program, our program, 280, it competes with Caribbean, 280,000 euros for European program. It starts at residency but ends in citizenship. In our case, we even give all of our clients a yield of 4% per annum, plus a buyback clause at the end. So a guarantee, he invests his money, when he gets his permanent residence or citizenship, he gets back his money. So it can't go wrong. It cannot go wrong. So at the end of the day, I think the lesson is stability, great health system, more and more important. Mohammed mentioned US. I wouldn't like to be sick in the US. The US is a problem, and the biggest problem of the US is the healthcare system. Of course, if you have a lot of money, you have access. But if you do not have a lot of money, you don't have access. So that is a problem, which does not exist as much in Europe. So I think that's basically the message is stability, good health service, good education services, the basis to create a great nation.
Right. So basically, we have run out of time, unfortunately, but there are 3 questions, which is actually for each and every speaker, which is good, that I wanted to ask you very quickly. If you could all answer those questions in brief. So the first question we have from one of our attendees is that were there any cases of buying property worth of 2 million in Cyprus online? Have you had cases so far? Just answer briefly, if you can, please.
In Cyprus?
Yes, it was the question to address to Cyprus particularly. Were there any did you have any cases buying property online?
Yeah, of course, yes. Now we are now having 4 deals which are being concluded online. Okay, wow. But they would have been concluded offline had the borders been open. The borders are closed. So it does work. I mean, I'm not here to speculate about that, so it's possible. The only thing that needs to be done, you need to send an email to authorize a person, a company, or an individual to act on your behalf at registering or at depositing your sales contract in the land registry. This is the way it works. Again, okay. I mean, if you want to apply for a residency card and citizenship, this is where you still have to come. But with the passport program, you can buy online, and then you can apply. You can appoint a person who is going to apply your citizenship application on your behalf. So to apply for citizenship, you don't have to be present in Cyprus. You need to be present in Cyprus to leave your biometric data. This is the only thing that requires you to come to Cyprus. But this process can be done in 3 months, in 3-4 months, because you know this 6-month period is counted from the day when you get your residency card in Cyprus.
Okay,
right?
thank you, George, for this. Basically, yeah, so the answer to the question is answered. There were cases when people were buying property online.
Yes.
The next question I have is to Mohammed, and it's a tricky question. I personally like this question. What are the reasons why investing in Grenada in a real estate project depending on tourism in light of tourism being damaged?
So, Dennis, spot on. I think you got to remember two things. One, human beings, we're wonderful characters because we snap back and we show significant resilience. So if you look at after SARS, if you look at after 9/11, the tourism industry bounced back. I mean, look, a month ago when all the boutiques opened in Guangzhou, not even a month ago, 2 weeks ago when all the boutiques opened in Guangzhou, I mean, Hermes had its best day trading ever. The boutique in Guangzhou raked in $2.3 million. So there's going to be all this pent-up demand, and people have come under stresses in their life, and to repair those stresses, they need a holiday. Now, if you look at the Caribbean, where is it located? It's located at the toe of America. There's 250 million people in America, and the Caribbean has traditionally been their holiday destination. Now, in terms of tourism in the Caribbean, there's two types of tourists. One is a cruise tourist and one is a stayover tourist. I think it's fair to say that the cruising industry is going to be under a period of stress for about 3 years, and people are going to prefer land-based tourists to holidays. So if you look at the Caribbean, it's a low density development, what we develop for sure. So the risks of transmission of all of these uncertainties are limited. And I don't think people are going to be comfortable going on 12-hour flights, 14-hour flights. Better to go on a 2 to 3 hour flight in your backyard. God forbid something happens, you can get home quickly. So, you know, there is a school of thought which isn't just limited to the Caribbean professionals, but I've been reading about it across the main industry press, that the Caribbean stayover tourism market at the highest level could bounce back very, very strongly towards the end of this year. So, you know, we take that view, and we look forward to be the beneficiary of that increased demand.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think we all like the fact that the audience asks us these very interesting, important questions. So going forward, the next question I have, it's addressed to Portugal. So I presume Frederico is more to you to address. When do you perceive that the borders opening up in Portugal, so foreigners or investors they can visit and view the property? When do you perceive the borders to be open?
It's very hard to say. It will all depend on how Spain will evolve and other countries will evolve. Today, it's extremely hard to. I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know. It's very hard to say. If I had to speculate, I would say July, but I think it's too early. Maybe. I think it's a $1 million question today, and nobody knows that answer. Not only the General Health Service, and they come and they speak to us every day with all the stats, etc. But nobody knows how this will evolve, and it all depends on other countries. So maybe we'll open not to Spain, but to other countries, or it all depends on how the disease is spreading all over the world.
Okay. Right. So the next question is on Cyprus. George, one more question to you. Someone asked that they have clients who are still waiting for approval of citizenship since May 2019, and this person understands that authorities will be escalating the approvals and speeding them up to make it more attractive. Do you think this is something that's going to happen?
I don't think that, you know, to be honest with you, I don't think that there are very many people who have been waiting for their passport approval since May 2019 or 18. What date?
19.
19. Okay. By law, the government says that, or promises that it takes 6 months, but in fact, yes, it does take up to 1 year. So I think that they have to wait a little bit more. I think that they are going to get their citizenship approval in May, June this year, because there's a very
You don't think they'll be speeding it up?
No, it hasn't been announced yet. Hopefully they are going to speed it up, but it hasn't been announced yet. There have been discussions about it, but there is no official announcements about that. So far, and since the end of 2018, a lot of applications have been delayed because of the huge backlog and the huge interest coming from prospective investors. And the Cyprus program, believe it or not, it's very unique because you can do business live, study, work in any of the 28, or maybe now it's 27 European states. So I think that there are two programs which could be compared to each other: the Maltese program and the Cyprus program. And the interest is very big, and I think it's going to be bigger. But yes, these guys who applied in May 2019, they have to wait a little bit. So because if you want to apply for by the criteria of naturalization, for example, you have lived in Cyprus for 7 years and you want to apply for citizenship, the authorities are going to ask you to wait, because they are not going to accept your application right now. Applicants who are investors, they have an exception. They still accept passport applications, and they are still working to issue citizenship approvals to investors. So these particular people, they have to wait a little bit.
Okay, well noted. In the meantime, there was a thank you for with regards to your replies, Frederico and George here, and to you, Mohammed, apparently as well. So there's two more questions I have actually, but it's I don't know. It's Frederico. It's a question to you, but I'm not sure if you can. Well, it's not about real estate. In fact, it's about how can a client of someone open up a bank account in Portugal without visiting Portugal, because obviously they're limited with their travels. If there's something you can advise on.
Basically, Portuguese banks work extremely well, and the majority of our bank accounts can be opened remotely. So my answer is yes, they can be opened remotely. Sometimes there's required, but in case of just the bank account, yes, it's easy and simple. And they can contact us if they need any help. We would like to help them.
All right, and the last question I have is, Mohammed, it's to you. You probably being an expert, you would understand the question more than I will, because one of our US-based practitioners is asking the question: what would be the minimum investment requirement that will be accepted by the investors?
I presume you're talking about the E2, and I think let me also advertise your session tomorrow. I think you have a session tomorrow afternoon with a very well-known US lawyer, if I'm not mistaken,
Yes,
where I think these questions can really be delved into. But it's not defined in statute. Under the E2, it says 2 or 3 things in the legislation. One, you have to come from a treaty country. And I will point out that every treaty is different. Grenada has a very flexible E2 citizenship, E2 treaty visa, in that you can stay in the US for 5 years. It can be renewed multiple times. To obtain this, you have to invest a significant amount in your own business. Significant isn't defined in the regulations. However, by custom is between $100 to $200 to $300,000. And they really look at the business plan to make sure that that business plan is viable and it can support you and your family. And there is an interview at your nearest consulate, either where you reside or the nearest consulate to Grenada, and that is the process. And I think, as one of the gentlemen or one of the previous questions mentioned, now is a great time to invest, because in the US you're getting asset pricing which we're never going to see again in a generation. There has been a total rebalancing in terms of investment thresholds in some established businesses. So if you're looking to acquire a franchise or a running business, now is the time to really look at that seriously.
Okay, right. So I think we are done with questions so far. It was quite an interactive session, and I'm obviously I would like to first of all obviously thank you, gents, for your expertise and for your time today. It definitely was a pleasure for me, and I'm pretty much sure it was a pleasure for all the attendees. And tomorrow, as it was already mentioned by Mohammed, we have another IMC session coming in about the US immigration by Ron Klasko from Klasko Immigration Law, which is a very big law firm, immigration law firm in US. And in light of, let's say, most recent tweets came in yesterday, that's going to be a very important and interesting discussion, I should say. Anyway, thank you very much to everyone. Thank you our fellow speakers. Thank you to audience in attendance. And I definitely wish you, on behalf of our speakers, a very nice morning, afternoon, or evening ahead. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Denis.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.